Good evening and welcome to everybody. And can we now have the prayers from Father Tony, please? I think it's the one.
God our Father, we ask your blessing upon this meeting and all the members of the Colchester Borough Council. Guide us with your wisdom and help us in our decisions to do all that is for the common good of all the people of Colchester. And we commend this intention to our Heavenly Father as we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May Almighty God bless us all in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Good evening and welcome, and can I welcome the multimedia journalist students from the University of Essex who are watching our proceedings from the gallery. We have some housekeeping announcements to make. Action in event of an emergency. There are no planned alarms planned for this evening, but if alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, and then to the car park behind the town hall in St. Ronald Street. The council audio records all its public meetings, and these recordings are published on the council's website. There are toilets available on this floor as well as the ground and second floors of the town hall. Discreet use of mobile phones and other devices is welcomed, but you are requested to set them to silent and not to use voice or camera flash functions. And if a mobile phone does go off during the meeting, it is a £20 fine to the Mayor's Charities. And speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. We have a few apologies tonight. We have Councillor Elliott, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Lilly, Councillor P. Oxford, Councillor Quince, Councillor Offen, Councillor Arnold and Councillor Davidson. Right, we now come on to item 2 tonight, which is Have Your Say. We have 5 members of the public and 1 councillor having your say. Sorry, 6 members of the public and 1 councillor having your say. So can I first of all ask Nick Chilvers, please, to come? I think, Mr. Chilvers, you know the rules. 3 minutes to speak and a bell after 2. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councillors. I do sometimes wonder how this administration works. Is it joined up or solo? Silo, I should say. And whether customers really are at the forefront of its thinking. The strategic plan says, ensure a welcoming place for residents and visitors and create a business-friendly environment. Now, recently, there were changes to the paying arrangements introduced at St John's and St Mary's car parks. Now, they weren't welcomed by the traders, and there's been a stream of complaints in the local press. Both my daughters, small kids and shopping, busy lives, regularly use St Mary's until the changes. Below that, too much hassle. They're just the sort of customers that you do want to attract in the town. They now avoid the place. You really know how to tick people off. Your handling of this doesn't sit well with the text of your updated, to be updated, governance guidance on your agenda item 7.4. What does it say? Working together, taking informed, transparent decisions, engaging with local people and stakeholders. Anyway, we have a portfolio holder for customers. And included in the job description, it says, champion the customer's point of view. So this is not a question for the portfolio holder, Councillor Graham, covers car parks. I've heard all about the alleged high-tech advantages of the new system. I want to know from Councillor Oxford whether she can recall being formally consulted about the changes, from pay on exit to pay on display. This is an obvious subject that ought to have had her input. If so, what was the response? And if not, perhaps the council leader can explain why it didn't happen and whether the revised government's policy will be anything more than just window dressing and routinely ignored. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Beverley-Oxford, would you like to respond?
No, I think we discussed it as cabinet, but it doesn't come under my portfolio. It comes under Councillor Graham's.
Councillor Graham, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to say that I'd like to thank Mr Chilvers for his comments and also to thank him for doing the civilised thing and corresponding with me via email. I know that we have some back and forth via email. He has raised this issue with me. I know that his daughters are Mile End residents, so obviously my ward. If you could continue to do that, I'm more than happy to continue our dialogue and hopefully make things better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now call on Valerie Blowers, please? The rules are you have 3 minutes to speak and the bell will go after 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members, for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Valerie Blowers and I'm representing the Blackwater Against New Nuclear Group, otherwise known as BANG. In September 2008, the Colchester Borough Council Scrutiny and Oversight Panel held its meeting in public at West Mersey. As a result of the public concern expressed at that meeting about the selection of Bradwell as a potential site for a new nuclear power station, the scrutiny panel carried out extensive investigations into the suitability of the site for this purpose. On 19 February 2010, the Council responded to the Government's consultation on the draft National Policy Statements on Energy and concluded, and I'll just read from the end of the response, the Council and residents to the local area naturally remain sceptical, believing that only greater harm will come to life in and around the estuary through any new build that will rely far more heavily on the estuary water than was the case previously. In the certain knowledge that this harm cannot be mitigated, Colchester Borough Council opposes the selection of Bradwell as a suitable site for a new nuclear power station. In view of the agreement just signed today between the UK and Chinese governments to allow the Chinese to design and build their own reactor at Bradwell, BANG and many other people would like the Council to reiterate its opposition to the use of Bradwell for new nuclear development. I should say we are actually against development of the site by any developer, not only the Chinese. Thank you.
Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you very much, Valerie Blowers. This is very helpful to have this matter raised. I actually had it raised at a residents' meeting last night. The Council's position on this matter has not changed since it was last discussed. I would be more than happy if any council wished to bring this forward as a motion to discuss at some future council meeting. Having seen the agenda for tonight's meeting, though, I suspect that Madam Mayor would not allow it as an emergency item on this particular agenda.
All right, next can I ask Rob Brown, please, to speak?
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, Last week, Stuart Bond, the chairman of the Priory Area Residents Association, addressed a cabinet meeting. And earlier this week, he and I'm secretary, met the leader of the council. We wish to enlist your support in opposing the reversal of traffic flow in Priory Street. We were opposed to this not on grounds of NIMBYism, but on grounds of safety, logic, and the preservation and appreciation of our ancient heritage. We live in a street with 5 religious establishments, 60 units of sheltered retirement accommodation, including elderly and sometimes vulnerable residents, with pedestrian access directly onto the street. At the beginning and the end of the school day, parents and children crisscross the street between the school and the car park and the pavement on the opposite side. The school is close to the blind entry into the street from East Hill, and so this represents an extremely dangerous situation. The religious establishments have services, funerals and other activities at different times during the week, often unpredictably. These make full use of the roadway and sole pavement, with hearses and other vehicles blocking the street, prayers spilling out of the Islamic Cultural Centre into the street, shoppers walking with buggies or in wheelchairs and to and from the town centre and the car park. Lack of pavement space means there are frequently numbers of pedestrians, often vulnerable ones, with no option but to walk in the road. This is now just about sustainable because traffic turning into Priory Street from Queen Street has to start slowly because of the tight turn into Priory Street. And in almost every case, people are just coming home or going into the car park to park. Most of our houses in Priory Street front directly onto the street, and for much of the length of the street, there is no really usable pavement on that side. Residents, including small children, elderly and less mobile people, have to confront speeding traffic immediately they open their doors. This is likely to be made much worse than it is now by reversal, as traffic will be faster, more frequent, and driving to the left, so closer to the houses, as is evidenced from surveys of one-way streets in the UK. At the western end of the street, too, the problems of combined pedestrian movements already mentioned, the lack of visibility from Priory Street into Queen Street at that corner, and frequent blockage of Queen Street by dense traffic seem to be insuperable. The street includes 2 of the most important historic assets of Colchester, the Priory and the Roman Wall with its medieval bastions. It is already disgraceful that these are treated with so little respect, but they are still an important tourist attraction, with recent belated moves to enhance opportunities for viewing them and improving their surroundings. If Priory Street becomes a polluted rat run for through traffic, this will come to nothing, and Colchester will deservedly be shamed for its utter disregard for its heritage. We call on your support in this matter.
Thank you very much. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for those comments, Mr Brown. We've talked about this a number of times. I'm very familiar with the issues here. I saw the plans for the road reversal yesterday for the first time. I think I said to you yesterday, I'll repeat it now, they looked very scarce from what I've seen. I've just come from the Colchester Institute, where they've been presenting an exhibition about the Cullen Bank widening, those proposals. So I took the opportunity to mention it again about Priory Street, say just an hour or so ago. As I understand it, the purpose of the road reversal is to prevent the U-turns being taken place at 2 different points, just at the very south of the High Street, just as it meets Queen Street, and also at Lewis Gardens as well. I did make the point to Essex County Council that I didn't believe that the purpose was being communicated to the residents properly, and I've asked them to do better and to inform you better. I haven't had full time to digest all of the plans. Obviously, I've been focusing on the car park improvements, which will enhance the town, will enhance the heritage, will enhance the wall, and hopefully will make it your street and your area and that part of the town a much more pleasant place to be. But in terms of what you just said, I'm well aware of it. I'm involved with it, and it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Angel Callion, please, to come and speak?
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to have a say. Unlike councillors of this assembly, I have the right to free speech, so it won't be a problem if I were to say something like, "You've got a couple of lying bastards in your executive management."
I think I do have the right to disallow vexatious talk, so please will you speak properly? Thank you.
From experience, disturbing a body under chloroform does not necessarily result in an awakening or a functioning state. Can you please come to the present? It might be news, but what officers think of who or what I am is none of my business, nor is it the business of the officers in the Paid Services Department. That is, until it affects the business and the purpose of our council and statute. I stand here only as a threat to prejudice and discrimination within our local government. It is not my raison d'etre to salve annoyance and console indifference, but you demand that I do so. So, Adrian, after years of systemic operational failure by executive management and the Paid Services Department, you will be pleased that I am now in a position to fulfil your wish. I am ready to present a case on fraudulent misrepresentation, civil contempt and malfeasance in public office to a court for consideration and judgment. Councillors Justin Knight and Julia Havis, roles and responsibilities of ward councillors. Number 1 here, it says to undertake casework for constituents and act as an advocate in resolving concerns and grievances. Therefore, I am now formally serving you with court proceedings. You will need the assistance of the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer and various other departments and people that have been involved in the situation so far. Who may I pass the court proceedings to, please? They are actually addressed to Councillor Justin Knight and Councillor Julia Havis as my ward representatives.
I think if they've been passed on to them, they'll pass them on to Mr. Pritchard and it will be dealt in through the courts as the proper procedure.
Madam Mayor, just to say I'm delighted to hear that Mrs Callahan is finally taking us to court after 5 years of imploring her to take us to court.
It's longer than that.
I'm delighted. We will look forward to going to court. As I say, we will argue our case, and if we win, that's fine. If we don't, we will deal with the actions that the court inform us to deal with. And as far as our councillors are concerned, if there is legal action, we will pick that up as a council. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Sharon Wilsden, please, to come and speak?
Hello, thank you very much for letting me
Sorry,
speak.
just before you start, can I just remind you of the rules to speak? And can I receive the petition, please, first of all, the court orders? Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt you, but must to get these things right. All right, you'll have 3 minutes and the bell will go after 2 to remind you there's 1 minute left. Thank you.
Very much.
And can I remind you that public participation that's discriminatory, scurrilous, vexatious or improper, I will stop you from speaking. Thank you very much.
There will be no need for that. I will be completely polite. Thank you very much. I don't like judgments made about me, and that's why I'm here. These questions are to councillors Tim and Julie Young. In 2010, I met with both of you asking for advocacy concerning my appalling situation, which is ongoing harassment, criminal damage, antisocial behaviour, intimidation, and continual false counter-allegations. Your remedy to these problems was to pass me verbally a telephone number for a mental health nurse. I mentioned this situation and your suggested remedy at the local meeting where Nick Alston was present, 2013, I believe. Seeing a mental health nurse has not resolved any forms of harassment, criminal damage, antisocial behaviour, counter continual false allegations. 5 years on, I am in an even worse situation, and I want to know what now, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor Julie Young and I did take up Sharon's case a number of years ago with the police, with the council officers and with other agencies. It is a complicated story. I understand she has been in contact with council officers again very, very recently, in other words, this week. She's right, there are allegations and counter-allegations. There are versions of events that support both sides. And I'm sure the council officers that are now dealing with it will deal with it appropriately.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Christopher Manby, please, to come and speak?
Brilliant. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is addressed to anyone on the planning committee who cares to answer, but in particular anyone from Stanway. I come to you tonight with a simple question of major importance to the local economy. I promise to behave myself. Why did councillors turn down a plan that would have brought hundreds of jobs, as well as plenty of money, into Colchester? I'm speaking, of course, of the Stane Park development, which was recently turned down by this council's planning committee on the grounds that it would harm the vitality and viability of the town centre. Now, plenty of people would dispute that premise, but let's leave it aside for 1 second. If Stane Park represented a threat to the town centre, then why is the council so keen on the Northern Gateway project on the other side of town? This is 8 times bigger. I mean, surely if one's a threat, the other's a threat too. You know, there's a kind of inconsistency going on here. The big difference, to my eyes at least, seems to be that the council own the land on which the Northern Gateway will be built. That seems to be the only major difference. Otherwise, I'm at a loss trying to work out how one project is vital to the local economy and the other's a public menace. To suggest that Stane Park will hurt the town centre, but the much bigger Northern Gateway will not, because the council has a finger in the pie, makes no sense whatsoever.
Excuse me, please. Can I just remind you to address your comments properly?
Okay. I did promise to behave myself. Hands up. The idea that the local economy is a zero-sum game between out-of-town developments and the town centre is, in my view, misguided. More jobs and growth mean more money in Colchester, and surely that ultimately benefits everyone. The way to help the town centre is to cut the costs of doing business and the cost to consumers, cut the cost of parking, cut the cost of business rates to local businesses and shops. You can help to make the town centre more competitive. You really can, without killing off promising initiatives on the periphery. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just stating things the way I see them. The planner's report argued that the area earmarked for development would be better given over to traditional methods of employment. Well, I for one would love to hear the definition of traditional employment. Surely in a dynamic, ever-changing free market economy, there is no such thing. It is not for this council to quibble over the type of employment people may or may not choose for themselves. Surely they should be happy that more people are to be employed in the local area. I also understand that some of the councillors for Stanway recently wrote letters of apology to their ward residents. Now, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but they didn't seem to have raised much of a protest, but they do seem to have recognised the wrong decision has been made. Now, people wanted this. The reaction from local residents is, I hear, overwhelmingly positive in favour of the development, which makes it even more baffling that the committee decided to kill it. Thank you all for listening. I'm eager to hear what the relevant councillors have to say for themselves, and I hope the committee change their mind if and when the decision is appealed.
Thank you very much. I'll call on Councillor Manning, Chairman of the Planning Committee, to respond.
Okay, just to get rid of the Northern Gateway, the application for Northern Gateway was passed, I believe, in 2006. That was actually before I was a councillor, and it was before this group were in administration. So that was passed under another administration. It's been sitting there waiting for the NAR3 to be built. Once that's built, it makes it a viable site, and therefore that goes ahead. So that didn't even go through the planning committee while I was on it. We consider each application on its own merits, and we consider it according to the laws of the land. And it is a legal thing. It is a policy thing. And it was said very, very clearly on the night to the applicant, if you go to the local plan committee and get the allocation of that land changed, we would look on it on a much more favourable term. But the reality is we have to support our policy, because if we don't, we open ourselves up to any development anywhere. And that is a very dangerous precedent to set.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker tonight is Councillor Dave Harris, and this is about Colchester in Bloom. And I suggest it was better as a 3 minutes have your say to say the good results of the group.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be brief. I know you've got a long evening, so I don't want to extend things any more than they have to be. But I didn't want this moment to pass, Madam Mayor, without saluting some of the residents of Colchester, a particular group I'm involved with, which is the Colchester in Bloom team, which I know you've been very supportive of in your time as in your mayoralty, and we thank you for that. But I wanted to just pass on our thanks for the awards that we got from the Angler in Bloom, of which there were several, through you, Madam Mayor, through all the councillors here, to their constituents, and to the Chief Executive, to the staff involved, because the gardeners that we have in the town are exemplary. Some of our neighbourhoods are absolutely brilliant in what they do, and there's several councillors in this room that I thank. Personally, I won't name them all, embarrass them all here, but they know who they are. There are several in this room that have supported us and come along to our award ceremony and partake of the In Bloom principle, and they make our town better for it. The businesses, the schools, of which I'm personally involved with, pubs, hotels, neighbourhoods, rail stations, all of those are brilliant people that what they've done for the town. Leroy Fox, I've got to mention here, he got the best garden in the whole of Anglia, best front garden in the whole of Anglia in one of our wards in Colchester, so well done to him. But I want to just thank you, and could you pass on our thanks from the In Bloom team to the gardeners that work for the council and all the neighbourhoods in Colchester. Thank you very much.
And I'll echo those sentiments. As having been one of the judges, it's one of the nice things to do as mayor, to go around and looking at gardens and looking at the businesses as well. So well done to all the winners on the day. Right, members, we're now moving on to item 3, which is the minutes. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July 2015 be confirmed as a correct record.
Point of order, if I may.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, very briefly. Within the minutes, I'd just like, for clarity, them to be updated to reflect the question I actually put to Councillor Graham, which was not that specifically the cycle provision should be reinstalled at the site that they've come away from, but that in the area more generally, so that the overall capacity of cycling parking in the town centre is what it was pre-Dominic Graham's, Councillor Graham's influence. Thank you.
Are we happy to accept that? Agreed. Thank you very much. We now come on to the Mayor's announcements. I've got a few, but I won't take too long on them. Just to say that I did represent Colchester in China. I was very fortunate to go to Yangzhou, which is in Jiangsu province, and this comes from Essex being twinned with Yangzhou, and what the towns there wanted to be twinned with towns in Essex, and Yangzhou chose us. They are a town of 2.3 million people, with a main street that's about 22 kilometres long. But we did talk about tourism and also about the big data from the University of Essex and projects like that. So we have made some links, and it all went very well. So I thank the Cabinet who suggested that I went on your behalf to represent the town there. And I thank the other members of the parties, including Gareth Mitchell, who I will name, who I think sometimes was probably like a swan with feet flapping underneath, but everything went smoothly and it all worked out well in the end. Secondly, members, as this is the council with 60 members and next year it will be a council of 51 members, I would really like it if at the beginning of the next full council meeting we had a whole group photograph. So I'm giving you advance warning now to member to come and be there. If you look over there, there is near Councillor Chapman, there is, I think, the last group photograph taken, and it'd be quite nice to have as many councillors there as possible and also the aldermen present at the time. So I'm giving you advance warning that I'll be doing a little reception before that meeting and we'll have the photograph done before the Christmas full council meeting. Next, my charities. There's some events coming up. The next big one, apart from the Oyster Feast, which you'll be pleased to note is being well attended, and Griff Rhys-Jones is my main speaker. And I've also, a late addition to the celebrities but will not be speaking, is Graham Napier, the cricketer. On Friday the 13th of November in the Moot Hall is the Mayor's Grand Quiz Night. So I hope to see as many of you as possible on that night. It's 7 for 7:30 p.m. It's bring your own food, but unlike the posters you may have seen, it is actually, there'll be a bar provided and there'll be drink on sale. It's to do with the licensing laws that we have to have a pay bar. And there'll be more events to come. And if you want to follow what I do, and this is for the journalist people up there, I do have a Mayor of Colchester's Facebook page, and all the events that I do get recorded on there, so you can see how busy I've been. I think I've done nearly 125 events since I became Mayor. And that's it for the announcements. So we can now move on to the next part of the meeting, which is declarations of interest, item 5. Any declarations of interest, councillors? All right, I'll start with Councillor Jowers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item number 8, motion on Essex Police. Non-pecuniary, but I am chairman of the Police and Crime Panel, and I will be taking part in voting in the debate, but I thought it best to let everyone know.
Thank you very much. I'll go around this way. All right, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you very much, indeed, Madam Mayor. We don't usually declare we're county councillors, but in the case of 7.1, the Colchester Economic Growth Strategy, several references are made in that report and strategy to areas I'm directly responsible for, and therefore I feel it's appropriate, so I shall be speaking that motion, that I declare that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corey.
Under point 8, motion J, I'm a proud member of the National Union of Teachers.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a few. On the motion F on the right to buy, I've got a pecuniary interest as chair of COLN, but I've sought dispensation and will be fully participating, speaking and voting in that debate, if I catch your eye. That is. On the motion on the police, like Councillor Giles, I'm a member of the Police and Crime Panel. On motion J, the Trade Union Bill, I'm a very proud member of Unite the Union. And is that it? I think that might be it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Right, I've now got a flurry of hands. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8, motion J, member of the NUT.
Councillor Naish.
On item J, I'm a proud member of ASLEF.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the same motion, I'm a proud national officer of the National Association of Probation Officers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, member of TESA, on the same motion.
Councillor Scott.
Proud to be a member of the NUT.
Thank you. Councillor Hogg. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Liddy, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a member of the GMB Union.
Thank you very much. And if other... Sorry, Councillor J. Young.
Motion J, Madam Mayor, in respect of my husband's chairmanship of Cone Housing, intend to stay and vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if anybody thinks of any other interests when it gets to it, just remember to declare it. Thank you very much. Item 6, items referred under the calling procedure, there are none. Item 7, recommendations and resolutions from cabinet panels or committees. So 7.1, can I call on Councillor Frame, please, to move motion B?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the recommendation contained in minute 21 of the Cabinet meeting of the 2nd of September be approved and adopted. Madam Mayor, we've had an economic growth strategy the last 5 years, and we're now bringing it up to date and looking to the future. And we have a pretty resilient economic strategy in this area. And the key priorities that we'll be focusing on is job creation, skill levels, retaining and creating businesses, improving our infrastructure, and securing inward investment and funding. So those are the key points that we're addressing in the next 5 years, and I would recommend this to the Council.
Thank you very much. I've got speakers. Councillor Willits.
Madam Mayor, this is a sad and sorry strategy with no hope for the businesses of Colchester. In our borough, we have seen massive housing growth ramped up by the administration to get more new homes bonus, and it has grossly outstripped the creation of jobs in this borough. The old strategy was not fit for purpose. The new strategy is about the same and is equally mundane and will be equally ineffective. So why is that important? And I would argue that the failure of the economic growth strategy means many more people are competing purely for a handful of new jobs which are being created. And Councillor Young was quite eloquent at a recent meeting about how Colchester is a low-pay area. And I agree with him, and we need a strategy which will address the creation of as many jobs as we have new people coming into the borough. It strikes me that the administration has very little interest in creating new jobs, with one exception, and we've already heard about that this evening, and that is the exception of the land it owns in the Northern Gateway, even to the extent of manipulating the proceedings of the Planning Committee to prevent 256
Councillor Willits, can I remind you,
being
please?
created at Stane Park. And I was quite disgusted that a second vote was taken after we'd taken our vote and had decided the matter, but I let the matter rest there. What business wants to see, Madam Mayor, is a new strategy, and it needs to free the meddling dead hand of this administration from the creation of jobs in the borough. I believe the administration does not understand the needs, it does not understand the hopes, and it does not understand the aspirations of small businesses in this town, which is the reason why so few jobs are being created in comparison with the number of houses that are being built. The government recently threw a lifeline to Colchester. It invited large towns and small cities to tap into the opportunity of an enterprise zone, which would deliver freedom from many of the unnecessary planning restrictions, up to 100% business rates discount and 100% enhanced capital allowances. But where are the enterprise zones in the new strategy? Not there. There is an obvious area in Colchester for an enterprise zone. The eastern segment of the town includes the Knowledge Gateway and the Hythe. The Knowledge Gateway, as we all know, is one of the prime locations in Essex for creating businesses based on science, technology and the creative sector. And in East Colchester, we have an exciting cluster of small, medium-sized businesses which are located in the town's former port and would make together an excellent enterprise zone, in my view. But yet again, the council has missed the boat. It failed the 18th of September deadline for bidding for an enterprise zone, and guess why? When I asked the portfolio holder why the council was not bidding for an enterprise zone and didn't include it in his strategy, Councillor Frame emailed me back saying, in regard to the council's planned developments of the commercial area in the North Colchester Gateway, this would prove detrimental. And so we have it in writing, no enterprise zone in Colchester, because as the portfolio holder says in his email, it would be detrimental to the North Colchester Gateway. And I thank you, Councillor Frame, for clarifying this matter for the people of Colchester. So, Madam Mayor, there we have it, an administration without any ideas, ready to kill off any competing developments which are against its own gain, and an economic growth strategy which goes absolutely nowhere. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've read this report. I think it's a well-constructed...
Councillor Willetts, can you turn off your microphone, please, so that we can hear him?
I think the report is well constructed, and I would welcome a strategy that delivers 6,000 new jobs and creates 1,000 new businesses. However, I have to question whether this is an achievable target, an aspirational target, or simply the stuff that dreams are made of. I take this sceptical view because, as we stand now, we have a moribund Vineyard Gate development, we have a St Boltoff's project which is permanently on pause, and we recently heard that the bid for lottery funding for the Wonder House has been rejected. So what I'm saying here is that without these three projects materialising, I don't think you can fulfil this particular 5-year strategy. Interestingly, the report says that Colchester has a buoyant and resilient economy and is well positioned to benefit from growth opportunities. This is supported by the Williams & Griffith investment of £30 million in the High Street store, and as the news that the Premier Inn in St Peter Street is finally getting underway. This, together with the continuing low interest rates and the stability of the national economy, this should give the stakeholders in these town centres projects every confidence to go get these things moving. But apparently it is not. And why is that? I would ask two questions. Do we have the right partners? And are our plans ambitious enough? In Vineyard Gate, we are looking at a total of 150,000 square feet and an anchor store of approximately 50,000 square feet. Are we really going to attract a national retail store that will draw people in from other areas around the region with such a modest development? To put it in perspective, in 2006, we had plans for Vineyard Gate to develop 550,000 square feet with an anchor store of around 150,000. I do believe that we should raise our sights if we are going to compete with other towns in the region. The report says that you will proactively target companies that are expanding their UK base and present them with a compelling case to come to Colchester. How would this be done? I would suggest that you first see Colchester as a new visitor would see it. This week on national television, they had a programme about two families swapping homes. One family came from Colchester and the other from a town in Oxfordshire. At the end of the programme, each family was asked to score their experiences. The family that came to Colchester said that they thought the castle and the gardens around it were wonderful, and they appreciated the town's history and heritage. And on that basis, they gave it 10 out of 10. However, when it came to the town centre, they said it was a bit tacky, and they gave it a 7 out of 10 rating. I think in order to sell the town to potential investors, we must address the appearance to newcomers. Our streets still look dirty, despite the money that we spend on cleaning them. We have to do more to make our town look attractive and provide a unique shopping experience that couples our history and our heritage with the modern demands of visitors and local residents. Madam Chairman, I would like to see this economic strategy succeed, but at present there is a big question mark over it, and the next 12 months will tell whether or not this is still a valid document with achievable goals, or that it will need to be rewritten. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bentley.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I was about to say that I welcome this report, and I'm sure the County Council's had a hand in crafting it. Having listened to my leader, I might not now, but anyway. However, I would say, and I would commend, that all of our district and borough and city councils in Essex write their own growth strategy. It is linked with the Essex Economic Growth Plan, and it is critically important that happens. What it does is a statement about what an area intends to do when it comes to growth, what jobs it wants in what sectors it wants. And actually, I commend this borough because it has clearly set out its stall around the creative arts and digital marketing sector, which I fully support. I happen to be in that sector. Whether that's a reason I need to declare an interest, you can let me know. No, that's fine. I'll carry on talking about it then. In which case, I think it's very important that the borough has done that, and it's set a stall out to do it. And also, it is critically important that we attract as many jobs as we possibly can. Actually, as my leader did make the point, we are going to build houses, we are building houses, and we must have people that have the ability to live in affordable housing in the town where they live where possible. Choice of employment is entirely up to the individual, but we need to make it as attractive as possible with jobs in the area when people come to live here. That is very, very important. And that's all forms of housing as well, particularly affordable. I do have an issue, though, and I've expressed this to senior officers here, and I have to senior councillors, and I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but I will just make the point about this enterprise zone. Now, we put in a bid, we collectively in Essex, that's all of us in Essex, put in a bid to sell up, to go on to government for enterprise zones after the call for the last site. I happen to be involved in the Harlow enterprise zone, so I have a little experience of what's going to happen over there and the attraction. And I know that there might be an opportunity with university enterprise zones, I do understand that, but I do think it's a missed opportunity. It was an expression of interest. You didn't need to necessarily progress with it, it was an expression of interest. It does mean now that sites in Braintree and Tendring will go forward, and I think it's a shame that Colchester won't. As I said, you didn't need to go ahead with it, but it's an expression of interest to do so. When you write a strategy, it is for the whole borough, not parts of it. So it's not a rant, it's just an observation I've made before, and I speak from the position of where I sit in the County Council. I think I would urge you, it's too late to reconsider, but certainly to talk about enterprise zones when they come up. If we can do something with the university, that is good. The eastern part of the borough is as important as the northern and western parts of the borough when they come to economic growth. It is important strategy, is for the whole borough.
Thank you very much. I've got two more speakers. Councillor Lockers next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking as someone coming fresh to this, I'm afraid that this strategy, for me, lacks the wow factor. It's not exciting, and it's more about hope and ambition than practical and, more importantly, joined-up steps to make Colchester thrive. I also think it lacks imagination. I've looked at similar strategies for other councils, and by comparison, they are fizzing with ideas. There's the Fair Employment Charter introduced by one council. There are council-backed shop locally initiatives. There are imaginative plans that nurture social enterprises, have ambitious community asset transfers, and of course, enterprise zones. And then there are ways of the councils themselves are making themselves leaner and better to better enable economic growth, with more shared services, less bureaucracy, and with more devolution of responsibility to those who have the economic expertise to make these things happen. These, for me, are missing from this strategy, but I think the biggest omission is a feeling for what Colchester is and what our residents want Colchester to be, and I think that's a shame.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith and then Councillor Tim Young.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Isn't it interesting? U-turns do seem to be becoming very thick and fast in politics now, and we start off with Councillor Willits. He's disappointed at our growth record in our economic strategy. The economic strategy that shows us ranked 51st out of 433. And he thinks that's not good enough. Well, I suppose he's right, but the way he was speaking, you would have thought we were about 430th out of that list. Because let's look at what we have achieved in the last term of the growth strategy. A 15% increase in jobs in Colchester. We're increasing jobs at a faster rate in Colchester than we are increasing houses. And as a result of that, we are attracting people from other areas, neighbouring districts, into Colchester for employment. Indeed, when you look at all the neighbouring districts, they are all net givers of people for jobs. Colchester is in rough equilibrium. Every person who gets on the train who commutes to London is being replaced by someone from Baber, from Tendring, from Braintree, commuting into Colchester because of our success in creating jobs. And that is not something you can say of some of our neighbouring councils, particularly some of our neighbouring councils who have leadership of a different political colour. And talking about self-employment, did you not also see that we've increased self-employment in Colchester by 25% in the past 6 years? This has been a stunning growth and compares very favourably with many other neighbouring areas who are losing jobs and losing businesses. Indeed, I was speaking to Colby today, and they reported that our business incubation centres, of which we built the second one, are full, 100% full. Every single space taken. Isn't that great for new business in Colchester? And of course, at the university, we've got the Enterprise Hub going on down there, doing great guns, producing some sort of computer games. I don't quite understand them myself, but apparently they're really good. And what's more important, they're attracting Microsoft. I've heard of them. They're a big company. Some of you might not know about them. They've been coming to Colchester. So isn't that good? And talking of people coming to Colchester, of course, you mentioned the Hythe. Sea trucks are coming to Colchester, coming from an employment area where they got government subsidies to an area that doesn't provide subsidies because of what Colchester can offer, because we can provide the skills and the jobs. You talk about addressing low play. Well, hold on. This is the council, the first council in Essex, that brought in the living wage for all its employees and all its contractors. That is addressing low pay. And we're encouraging other businesses in our borough to do the same. So I don't take too much of that. And then we talk about other areas of growth. I mean, have you not been to the university? Have you not seen the Knowledge Gateway? Have you not seen the planning application that came in this week from the university for more jobs, for new developments down there? What about the High Street? Before this meeting, I was in Angel Court looking at a development there of housing, shops, retail units, bringing jobs to Colchester, turning, oh yes, it was a redundant council office, wasn't it? Was this the bureaucracy that you're saying we're not cutting? Councillors, I really do think that Willett's world has gone into a complete parallel universe this time. It really, really is not good enough. But let's turn to the rest of the Conservative group. Councillor Jarvis, I actually agree with you. I think we could do and should do more to improve the High Street, and that's what we're doing. That's why we're working with Colchester Presents. That's why we've got the heritage events that we've had successfully, and why we've got Light and Shade. I will recall you some very nice photographs there of me out with a bus outside First Sight. It's quite good. It's on the internet, apparently. Thank you, yes. So we are doing more about that. And Councillor Locker, you talk about local businesses. Absolutely right. That's why we changed our procurement strategy to enable us to help local businesses. And that's why, for example, when the contracts are going out now, we're splitting them into smaller batches so local businesses have got more of a chance to apply for them. So that's what we're doing to help local businesses. And the record speaks for itself. Growth in jobs, 15%. Growth in employment, 25%. That is a record which the rest of Essex should emulate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tim Young, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be brief, but I do compare and contrast the rather intemperate contribution by Councillor Willits with the other contributions from the Conservative group. This is an economic growth strategy. All our strategy documents are living, breathing documents. They can evolve and don't just sit there on a dusty shelf. And I'm sure Councillor Frame will have listened to the contributions from Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Bentley and Councillor Locker. Didn't agree with all they said, but there were some useful bits in there that I'm sure he will listen to and try and incorporate, because there's some useful suggestions in there. He probably didn't listen, as most of Councillor Willett's own group didn't, to what he said. But I did want to take up with Councillor Jarvis the word rejected when it came to the Wonder House application. I think that suggests that it's been turned down out of hand and thrown on the scrap heap. That's not the case. It has suffered the same fate as the castle refurbishment application first time did. Second time, we listened to the feedback from the Heritage Lottery Fund, and look what happened. It is one of the most successful refurbishments that we've done, and the castle continues to exceed income and all the targets that we've given it. And I hope the same. Certainly the feedback on the One House application was very encouraging from the Heritage Lottery Fund, and I think in the next round we would hope to be successful, because as he knows, it is a very innovative and exciting project. So I hope he will get behind that. I know he's been around to see it, and that we will see a successful conclusion to that.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Frame, please, to sum up?
Yes, with great difficulty, I think, Madam Mayor. There's a wide-ranging views coming from the other side, which some of which I recognise and some of which I don't, actually. The strategy we've got before us talks about creating 6,000 jobs. They're not plucked out of the air. They're based on the East of England forecasting model. So we're not thinking of a number and just saying that's what it's going to be. We're doing it on the basis of real data. Councillor Smith mentioned the sort of jobs we've already created in the existing strategy. The new one will do exactly the same. We'll get new inward investment. We're already getting a huge amount. The university have just announced their planning application for a £10 million investment in the Innovation Centre. Councillor Bentley has mentioned that, and the University Enterprise Zone is one which we fully support and which will bring much needed jobs and money into Colchester. So I believe that our strategy is going to go forward. It's a living document, as Councillor Young said. We can adapt it as we go along. It's not set in stone, but it will adapt to whatever challenges are facing Colchester. And that's what we're up for in this administration. Any challenges we will meet. I recommend the strategy to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I invite you, please, to vote on this motion? All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining?
Motion is carried.
The motion is carried. Thank you very much. I now move on to motion C, and I invite Councillor Corey, please, to present the motion to Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the recommendation contained in minute 37 of the Cabinet meeting of the 14th of October 2015 be approved and adopted. This report is on the end-of-year review of the risk management, although it says waste management on my card. It's about risk management, and it's hopefully not going to be a controversial one. I believe that it's quite straightforward. If you are to look on page 47 of the report, you will see the key messages. Those key messages are actually about the risks we face as a council from the cuts that are coming in the spending review and policy of the central government. Those risks will put risk upon our budget strategy, but I'm confident, and I'm confident based on last year's report to say that we do have good systems in place, that we will ameliorate the effects of those spending cuts, and we will go through with our budget without the risk that it says in this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davis.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. What really concerns me about this, I think there is one main item missing. Debbie Hanson, who's the Audit Director of the Council's Auditors, on the 8th of September to the Governance Committee, she stated that there are two main risks for Colchester Borough Council, and the main one of those being the financial resilience of the authority given the budget gap and the percentage of new homes bonus used in the base budget. Now that is a massive 43% of the new homes bonus which is used in the base budget, and it is not a prudent use of that bonus. Councillor Smith, when he was portfolio holder, insisted that he wouldn't be using the new homes bonus to prop up the base budget, and this has now been flagged up by the auditors as being a major risk item. However, even though this has been flagged as a major risk, unless I'm misreading the paper, I cannot see it as a specific risk. It's just not there. So for the Audit Director to feel the need to raise a major risk around the financial resilience of the authority, I would suggest it should be in the risks that are flagged up in the report. Thank you.
Councillor Willits.
Madam Mayor, much good work has been done by the Governance Committee on the matter of operational risk of the activities which the Borough Council undertakes. But there is one specific matter which I find very difficult to accept in this report. That's in addition to the omission that was just pointed out. And it concerns unnecessary politicising and scaremongering. And I draw your attention to the risk matrix at Annex 2 of the report, which you'll find at page 59 in the supporting papers. And it shows two matters being of high severity of impact and very high probability of occurrence. And these are risks 4D, the potential impact of central government decisions to reduce public spending, and 6C, the inability to deliver the budget strategy because of government funding decisions. I would suggest, Madam Mayor, that there is absolutely no evidence for this at all. If we look at the medium-term financial strategy, our total income rose from 22 million last year to 23 million this year. Not a cut, I would point out, but an increase of 1.1 million. 3/4 of our income was not from government funding, which of course is addressed in risks 4D and 6C. Because 3/4 of our income comes from council tax and business rates, which last year went up from 14.3 million to 15.5 million. So at the best, these risks only relate to 1/4 of our income. Now, when we examine the historic trends, this year's revenue support grants certainly did go down, and there is a risk when grants go down, but new homes bonus went up. So the total income this year from government sources was some 7.8 million, exactly the same as last year. Next year, the same will happen. Revenue support grant will go down by 1 million, but new homes bonus will go up by 1 million. Thus, we get the same 7.8 million next year. And there seems to be very little risk in any of this. Certainly not the shattering risks which we're told could cripple the council in 4D and 6C. And provided we spend the new homes bonus on essential infrastructure and not on dodgy frills, then there is minimal risk to the medium-term financial plan. Finally, Madam Chairman, if we look at the audited accounts, you will see that at the start of this year, there were usable balances of some £19.5 million, up 13 million from the previous year. Thus, we have an enormous safety cushion to mitigate against any associated risks with income. So surely the expression of high severity and high probability of impact in risks for 4D and 6C cannot be true. So risks 4D and 6C come not from fact, not from projection of trends of income, but wishful, motivated political fancy being put forward just to embarrass the Conservatives. So I believe the risk analysis should therefore be soundly rejected.
Councillor Corey, to sum up the motion, please.
Thank you. I'll try and sum up, but there's some conflicting views coming from Mr. Councillor Willits himself and then between his own other councillor. The audit report that we have had from Ernst & Young, who are the external independent auditors, said that our reserves were at a prudent level. That include the new homes budget that we use, and they said that our position was adequate. So they are happy with how we forecast our budget and how we have our reserves at that prudent level. We also have this report which is written by officers. It is not political scaremongering, and I really feel that that is out of order and that is saying something towards our officers. This was not at all manipulated by me as a political portfolio holder. It was given to the Cabinet and it was given to me to put to the Council tonight. It has not been changed. It has not been put into political fancy. It is what the officers believe are the risks to our council. But on the other hand, I'm glad that Councillor Willits is confident about this council and its income that it's generated and the income we do get in, which does cover a lot of our budget. And that's important that we bring income in so that we don't have to cut frontline services because of the cuts coming down from central government. The two areas that he discussed, business rates increasing and local tax increasing, those incomes are good at the moment. But there are government changes in those areas. So he has to accept that 6C, which is in the report, which also includes the new homes bonus, is a risk to us. There are changes. And in business rates, we are in a current Essex pool. We want to continue with that Essex pool. But because Chelmsford are thinking about pulling out, we may have to then go back to the government and apply for a new pool. However, this year, they have not told us about the mechanism for which to do that. So at the moment, we are at the behest of central government, so that is a risk to us on that particular income that Councillor Willits said was so sturdy. So we do have these risks. It is not fanciful. We are actually very secure and we are adequate and we have prudent reserves. That's what it says from our external auditors. That's what it says in this report, and I commend it to the Council.
Thank you very much. I now put the motion to the Council. All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 7.3, and I call on Councillor Liddy to move motion D.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Agenda item 7.3, review of ethical governance policies, motion D. I move that the recommendation contained in minute 21 of the Governance Committee meeting of the 21st of October be approved and adopted.
Thank you very much. I'll put that. Anybody speakers? No. So, Councillor Diddy, would you add? Do you want to add anything to that?
No.
No. I therefore put. I'm just checking. I'm now putting the motion to Council. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Liddy, you can sit down for me because we've got a public speaker first on this next motion. Can I call on Ron Levy, please, to come and speak? You withdraw the request. OK, thank you very much. Can I then call on Councillor Liddy, please, to move motion E?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The review of a local code of corporate governance, motion E. I move that the recommendation contained in minute 24 of the Governance Committee meeting of 21st October be approved and adopted.
There are no speakers, so I therefore put the motion straight to Council. All those in favour? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 8. And item 8.1, these are motions, the right to buy for housing association tenants. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I intend to move that Council Procedural Rule 11.2 be suspended to allow this item in the order for the motion on right to buy for housing associations to be debated at this meeting.
Council, I put it to you that we suspend standing orders to allow this motion to be debated. Is that carried? All those in favour? That's carried. Councillor Smith to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I move that the motion on the right to buy for housing association tenants, the details of which are on pages 2 to 3 of the supplementary information, be approved in order to inform the Cabinet of the Cabinet of Council's view, and also Madam Mayor, to explain to Councillor Willett, how risk 6C is a real risk, because this involves the government policy changes having a negative impact on this council's finances. And the decisions that have been taken, for example, to reduce by 1% per annum the rents charged on our properties, will have a budgetary impact of £143 million over the lifetime of the funding. That, even in Willett's world, is a substantial amount of money, and that is a risk that has been caused by the government changing the rules, and changing the rules on a system that it set up only 2 years ago, when it forced the councils to take on an enormous mortgage on our housing stock. But let me talk more about the details as to why these proposals from the government are wrong. They're wrong on several grounds. They're wrong on pure financial grounds. They're wrong on structural grounds. And they're wrong on moral grounds. And it will surprise no one in this chamber to hear that I'm going to start with the financial ones. Firstly, the figures do not add up. As has been shown by independent analysis of the figures, merely taking the amount of money that councils get from selling their so-called expensive housing stock and giving it to housing associations will in no way make up for the shortfall. So the figures don't add up on that sense. And secondly, the government talks about one-for-one replacement. Well, how is this going to work? Because whilst a housing association might be replacing one-for-one, councils will have to sell 1 or 2 or 3 properties to fund the shortfall. So actually, the amount of social housing will be going down. And of course, if the amount of social housing is going down, and this is ignoring the fact that houses take a while to build, because, again, we take the example, the housing association sells a property now. It will take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to build the replacement property. Where is the family wanting social housing to live for those 2, 3, 4 years? That's not explained anywhere. Of course, there is an answer. They could go to the private rented sector. But there's a problem with this. The private rented sector is far more expensive. Rents there are double. Now, this would not matter if the people were not reliant on housing benefit, but if, as many of the people in these situations are reliant on housing benefits, it means that it's going to cost the government more. So actually, this is really looking like a stupid policy already. It's going to reduce the amount of social housing, it's going to cost more to put it in there, and it's going to raid councils of their money. In short, it's an attack on social housing. And this brings me on to the second point that's wrong with this scheme. The structural problems. Our housing industry, the private housing sector, has built consistently between 100 and 125,000 houses a year, varying slightly up and down over the past 30 years. It's got a very good reason not to build more houses, because when I studied economics, it told me that if the supply of something goes up, the price goes down. So builders will not build more houses because they could only sell them at lower prices. And if they sell them at lower prices, that means less profits. And house builders, unlike housing associations, are motivated purely by profit, and quite rightly so. So they're not going to increase their building. The only time this country has met the targets of 200, 250,000 houses a year, which everybody is now agreeing we need, is when 100,000 plus have been produced by the social sector, be it councils after the Second World War or be it housing associations. And quite frankly, I don't mind which, but we need those houses built, and the only way those extra houses can be built is by a buoyant social housing sector, and yet the government is determined to try and kill it off. And I've heard this from ministers saying at the District Council's network executive, yes, we want to build 200,000 homes a year for people to buy, not to rent. So this brings me on to the moral argument. Surely it's not right. It's not right in many ways. It's not right for this money from the sale of council houses not to be ring-fenced locally. Surely it's wrong for a property sold on Mersey to be given to a housing association, to be given to a housing association on Merseyside. It's not right, surely, for property in Castle to be sold and the proceeds to be given to Castleford. And if you think it's bad for Colchester, think what the London boroughs are facing. And that's why Boris Johnson, amongst others, is so opposed to this sort of idea. Because London boroughs will see they'll be getting no social housing in Tor and they'll be having to sell what little they've got. And that is going to create a lot of problems for a lot of people. And it's not fair, surely, for central government to go round and raid the borough council's coffers to pay for its policies. If it wants to give a tax break, which it's doing, for example, to deceased millionaires on their properties, it takes it out of general taxation. If it wants to give a tax break for right to buy, then it should take it out of general taxation and not pick on the councils who've retained their housing stock. And to be more accurate, the tenants who've retained their housing stock. Because what is happening to house building, and we'll hear more, I'm sure, from Councillor Bourne on this subject, is that with these impact of these changes, is that Colchester is having to stop building council houses. We built the first for a generation. Under these changes, they may be the last for a generation as well. That is a shameful record for a Conservative government to bring in here when it says it wants to help working families. No, what this government is doing is it wants to divide the country between the haves and the have-nots. If you've got money to buy your own property, you will be looked after. If you haven't, don't worry. Because I think we'll see in other motions coming up here, the government's got plans to make sure it's more difficult for you to vote as well if you don't settle in one place for one period of time. This, councillors, is what is wrong with this government and what is wrong with this policy. I urge you to support the motion.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Councillor Locker, please, to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the right to buy is an excellent idea. It helped diversify the council estates I lived on when I was younger, and it gave families aspiration. However, with all respect to the council, this motion, like many others on tonight's agenda, are about national policy that, with all the best will in the world, we are practically powerless to influence. Indeed, most of these motions are, in my opinion, designed to make party political points, wasting our time and that of officers in the process. I believe that we could do something far more meaningful than squabble about right to buy, police clear-up time, and trade unions. Instead, we could benefit from the cross-party talents of our 60 councillors and the views of the residents we represent to share positive ideas on local issues. In this case, it would be a case of what practical, and I emphasise practical, and imaginative steps this council can take to solve a very real housing shortage. In that way, we might even help real-life residents who need a roof over their heads to get one. And then we could move on, together as a council, to sharing our ideas for revitalising the town centre, giving a helping hand to local businesses, creating housing developments that actually have the schools, the shops, the surgeries, the pharmacies and the social centres they need, instead of the dormitory estates that have been waved through in recent years. I, for one, think that if we took this approach to political leadership, it would go a long way to restoring trust with the public and getting more people involved in local democracy. And who knows, we might even respect ourselves more too. That's surely got to be worth voting for.
Councillor Gerald Oxford, can I just remind people who should be speaking to the motion?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I got caught up on my bag. I won't take up a lot of your time, but first of all, I need to declare I'm a director of CBH, as are a number of others in the room, and as they've not declared, I'm assuming I don't have to leave the room, and I'm able to stay and vote. I'm getting the nods, so that's fine. There are several things that alarm me about this, not least of which we had 4,160 people on our housing needs register. It's now 4,700. There's only been one time in the last 10 years that the figure went down, and that was when my wife was portfolio holder of housing. We brought in 35% affordable housing and actually built them and let them. So we're now back down to whatever drabs people will give us, because government have insisted you can't ask for a reasonable rate. You've got to help them fill the pockets of the developers. The other thing that concerns me as well is more than 3.4 million adults between 20 and 34 living with their parents, because again they cannot afford to get on the property ladder. It's already been noted that out of our housing needs register, they can't afford to get on the property ladder as much as they might want to, because they don't earn sufficient, because our firms in a lot of cases don't pay enough. So they're two main things that really worry me. And right to buy, I think the original concept was wrong. I've felt it all the way along was wrong. We've lost thousands of our original stock we had before right to buy took effect in the 70s, the late 70s. And now it's going to decimate what's left. And housing associations just are trying to make the best of a bad deal. And they've been dealt a bad hand, and we're basically in a worse situation than they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to speak very briefly, hopefully, in order to support the motion. Echo entirely what our leader has said, and also Councillor Oxford as well. I just wanted to put a little bit of numbers to this motion as well, as the Conservatives and George Osborne in particular seem to be claiming the financial superiority. Certainly hasn't got any dangers of getting the moral superiority, to my mind. The problem that we have with this policy of adding housing associations to right to buy is that many of these housing associations are classified as charities and as such don't appear on the public balance sheet. Changing this situation would add an estimated £60 billion to the public debt which is increasing at a rate of about £2 billion a week already. That's all I wish to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got quite a few speakers now. Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking to support the motion, and I would urge others to do so too. I do think, what has this government got against social housing tenants? What have social housing tenants, people who live in council houses, ever done to the national government? Are they a threat in some way? Not voted for them, yes, of course. But this motion is about housing association tenants, and I think you have to understand how housing works in a local authority to see the effect, the disastrous effect on council housing tenants through the right to buy for housing association tenants policy. And it's very simple, really. It's based on need, it's based on what we have, it's based on what people can do, and it's based on what we've been asked to do by the government over the last 3 years. So, Madam Mayor, 3 years ago, 2012, this council and many other local authorities that were holding council stock were asked to take on the burden of debt. We jumped for joy. We were told, what a fantastic thing to do. You can take on the debt, in effect, hold the mortgage for those council houses, and against that debt you would be able to have a borrowing headroom. And from that borrowing headroom, you would be able to do lots of things with your plans. Well, you could have more plans, and we did lots of things with our plans. We had cross-party agreement for those plans. They went through scrutiny, we had some fantastic workshops, and we started to make a difference to the lives of people in this borough. One of the groups of people, Madam Mayor, we made a huge difference to was sheltered housing tenants. Tenants who are living in poor quality bedsits. We decided no one wants to put their parents into poor quality bedsit accommodation, and a lot of that bedsit accommodation was empty. We couldn't fill it up. So we put a plan together to spend millions of pounds over a series of years from our borrowing headroom, using our borrowing headroom, to develop new, better improved sheltered housing facilities in the borough. And you might be thinking, what on earth has this got to do with this motion? Well, that freed up elderly people who are living in our current council homes who didn't want to move into horrible bedsit accommodation that we had, but were encouraged to move into our new apartments for elderly people, thus freeing up their council homes. We've got plans to do more with Enoch House, what we've already done with Worsnop House, and we have plans to move across the rest of the borough. But the government's decision in the summer to increase the social housing rents, or decrease, I should say, by 1% year on year for 4 years, has had a disastrous effect on those plans. So it's all very well for Councillor Locker to come to this chamber and say, this has got nothing to do with us. You tell that to the social housing tenants, our tenants, who are in their houses at the moment with their families, and they have their families on the housing needs register. When are they going to have the chance to live in a council house? When are they going to have the chance to be able to apply for housing association properties? When are they going to get to do that? Because our stock is going to be seriously reduced by this policy and by the 1% reduction in rents. Seriously reduced. We have 6,500 tenants. How many might we have after 3 years of this? It's just not good enough. What has this government got against social housing tenants? And I do question any government who brings forward non-quality policies like this. Just don't understand how local government on the ground implements housing policy day in, day out. I know that there are members on that side who get housing, absolutely get housing. And I'm sorry that in your wards you're going to have tenants and people on the housing needs register who, because of this, which looks like a very simple one-for-one replacement for housing association tenants who choose for the right to buy their own property, will decimate our own council housing stock. It's not good enough. We want quality housing. And we've got people now on the housing needs register who years ago would never have put their names down. They would have gone away, they would have got their own mortgage. Well, they can't now. So it's very, very sad, and I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you very much. I've got 4 more speakers. Councillor Hayes.
For almost all of my adult life, I have been practicing in property law, and very, very many of my cases have been about possession claims where lenders on mortgage have resorted to people's homes in order to recover their loans. The government policy of encouraging home ownership, firstly, I would question the British obsession with home ownership. If you go to Germany or many countries in continental Europe, people very happily live in rented accommodation, and this obsession with purchase of one's own home just doesn't exist. Going to housing association properties themselves, the purpose of those properties is to provide homes for people who cannot afford to buy their homes. So where it seems to me completely mad to encourage people who cannot afford to take out large loans on mortgage to do so. If you go to America and consider the institutional lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those went bust in the mid-noughties because the portfolio of assets and loans that they had were actually unsustainable because their borrowers could not afford to repay. And to this day, there are thousands and thousands of homes in the United States with mortgages on them which will never be repaid. Now, if the government really thinks this is a good idea, then I suggest that they resign and we have another election as soon as possible.
Right, I had a rush of hands go up, so there's a few more speakers. Councillor Harrington's next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a brief point, if I may. I'd like to take issue with the premise first raised by Councillor Smith and then perhaps echoed by Councillor Bourne, that this government in some ways is trying to kill off social housing. I think it has a completely different motivation, if you'll allow me to express that, which is to enable home ownership. And in this regard, I seem to disagree with Councillor Hayes, because I think home ownership is extremely important and desirable in this country in particular. I think home ownership enables an Englishman to convert his home into a castle. And I strongly support the right to buy, and therefore support the government in this and not the motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tim Young, please.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Harrington for alienating anybody who isn't an English man in his contribution. Madam Mayor, Councillor Smith's right. This is an all-out attack on social housing. It's what it is, and it's why I'm supporting this motion. I think it's well worded and deserving of support. Let's be honest about this. The Conservative government put this in their manifesto as a late entry, hoping that they could then negotiate it away in any coalition agreements that they'd have to come up with, because they didn't expect to win the election any more than any of us did. Unfortunately, they did win, and so now they've got to deliver their manifesto. And I know for a fact that civil servants were in a right flap when they were told they had to deliver this one, because they were telling the ministers, it's just not deliverable. You're going to go and have to do a deal with the housing associations, which is what they have been doing behind closed doors against some of the housing associations, well, with our, not with our full support. The National Housing Federation were forced into a room and have come up with a voluntary deal, because if there had been legislation, Councillor Graham is absolutely right. The housing associations would have been put on the public books, adding millions of pounds to the public sector borrowing, and billions, if that's absolutely right. And they would have been declared as public bodies, public sector bodies, which they clearly are not. They are mostly charities and in the voluntary sector. So they put local authorities in a dreadful position, which Councillor Bourne so eloquently outlined, and they put housing associations in an invidious position. And they're alienating people all over the place. Housing associations having to, well, we've seen local authorities having to write off any new development of council housing, as Councillor Bourne has suggested, and housing associations having to scale back their developments because they don't want any more social housing. We heard it in the Prime Minister's speech at their conference. He wanted starter homes, and he's going to do away with the requirement of any social housing in any new development. So 35%, forget it. 20%, forget it. 0% is what they want of social housing in any new developments. It's shameful, because what is needed in Colchester, as in most of the rest of the country, is all types of housing. We need more sheltered and supported accommodation. We do need more starter homes to buy. I agree with that. We do need more starter homes to buy. We do need more shared ownership. But we do need, and in this borough more than anywhere, we need more social housing for rent. That is what the need is. That's why there's so many people on the housing needs register. And the government and the Conservative group need to get their heads around that. So that's what we need. The right to buy. It was bought in. It was popular, you have to say it. Mrs Thatcher did. But when you offer people enormous discounts to buy a property, then it is going to be fairly popular with some people. Of course it is. And some people took advantage of it. And you can't blame them, really, for doing that when you're offered, you know, if somebody offered you a car with a 60 or 70% discount, you'd probably buy it if you could afford it. A number of people couldn't afford it, but they got families, friends to help buy their housing. And of course, they've now been sold on. And a lot of the former council housing in Colchester is now buy-to-let. Buy-to-let landlords have bought them up. Some of those landlords are okay. Some of those landlords are absolutely scandalous and dreadful and treat their conditions and their tenants very, very badly. So the right to buy has had its day. And I know, like Councillor Bourne said, that there are Conservative councillors on that side of the chamber who believe in social housing, who believe in council housing, and they should support it in this chamber tonight. And I challenge them to do so. So I will be asking for a named vote.
Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Mayor. I have always believed that there's two fundamental rights to the residents of our great country, and that is food in their belly and a house over their, a roof over their head. Under this government, we have seen food banks multiply, and now with this right to buy housing association stocks and selling off council houses to pay for this, we're going to now see an increase in people without roofs over their heads and no opportunity to have a roof over their head. I have recently had 2 children return to my house, 2 single children who are unable to afford rents outside because they're low wages. So now they've come back to our house, and there's not going to be very much opportunity for them to move out. I've got 14 grandchildren, and I'm really concerned that when they're of age, they will not be able to afford to buy a house, and they won't be able to afford to rent a place, and I fear for them. So I will be supporting this motion, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Willits.
Madam Mayor, there seems to be some very muddled thinking going around the council chamber on this particular topic. I mean, I put my policy on the table straight away. I'm in favour of a property-owning democracy, and I think we should do all in our power to encourage people to own their own homes. And I'm surprised that the attitude of many of the colleagues on the other side of the chamber is to look at this problem from the viewpoint of the council rather than to look at the benefits which are being given to tenants by ensuring that there is, for instance, a reduction, a 1% reduction in the rents that they pay. I thought we'd have thrown our order papers in the air and said, yippee, we're doing something for those who can certainly appreciate a reduction in their rent. But I think the issue, the critical issue, Madam Mayor, is that those people who can afford to buy their own houses should do so. And if they just happen to be a housing association tenant or a local authority tenant, and they're in a position to buy their house, they should be allowed to buy their house, because our function should not be providing houses for people who can afford to buy their houses. Our function should be providing houses for those who perhaps will never be able to buy their houses. So what this policy is doing is it's providing a churn of ownership and moving those people who can afford to buy out of the local authority and the housing association orbit into the privately owned orbit, and leaving the housing associations and and local government to concentrate on those areas where it should rightfully be concentrating. The next issue, which no one seems to pick up, is the fact that if someone lives in a house, it doesn't really matter whether the land registry entry says it's owned by the Borough Council, a charity, or by the person who lives there. It's still one house with one resident in it. And that by changing the ownership, you don't actually increase the number of houses that are available. It doesn't really matter who owns a house. If there's a family living in it, you cannot give it to one of the other 4,160 families who are in need of a house. Changing ownership doesn't create a vacancy. It purely moves the ownership of the property in a way which we believe is socially desirable. Therefore, I make no apology for a Conservative policy which is intended to focus our minds on providing housing for those who need it and not providing housing for those who can well afford to go and buy their own house and live in it to their own content. So I think we're looking at the problem from the wrong point of view. It should be from the point of view of the people who need housing, not from the point of view of just balancing the books and, oh, it's so inconvenient that we've got to rebalance the loan book, which we took out under assumptions that are now no longer true. Let's concentrate on the people rather than the bureaucracy. Thank you.
Councillor Hogg.
Yes. Well, can I just say that I don't have 14 grandchildren, I have 3. But I do have 2 daughters. I have actually more daughters than that, but I do have 2 that are renting in the private sector that cannot afford to get to buy in the private sector. They can only afford to rent in the private sector. They cannot get on the housing needs register, so they're stuck in a no man's land, totally and utterly. But we are where we are, and as Councillor Young said earlier, this movable feast, a working document. When I joined this council, we had 16,000 properties. We now have 6. My concern, and I don't think the financial case has been made by the government, hence Boris's outburst. He sees the dangers in this, and we see the dangers. A shame you can't see it over there. What also I do see, and it isn't just about money, those of us that represent wards that have large swathes of social housing, St Anne's and St Andrews, it's not just about money, it's about communities. And what this is going to do is drive down the number of properties available where you have communities living together, supporting each other. I have a mother who lives in Fairhead, has children in Crown Bays and a son in Goring, and they work together, they live together, and it's the dismantling of these communities where we are headed. It's not just about the money. We should have properties available for people to get from the housing needs register, to get into property. We're not going there because the base is shrinking as we speak. And okay, I came from a council property, never had the opportunity to ride a bike, and maybe if I had done, I would have bought my council house. Never had the opportunity, never had the money, let alone the opportunity. But I think it's not just about finance, it's about dismantling local communities. And I have to say, 1 or 2 people seem to be gloating on that, and that's nothing to gloat about when you find that people who you've represented, that I've represented, families for 30 years on the White City estate where I grew up, where I was born, and proud to represent the St Anne's people. I I'm so sorry that we are in a situation where we cannot offer people who want to live in a community, their children to live in that community, to continue as a community, and they're not going to get the opportunity. So I should be supporting this motion. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jowers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, obviously this is a national issue which applies to Colchester. And what I would say is that it was interesting when Councillor Hogg said it went down from 16,000 to 6,000. What happened to the 10,000? They were bought. Now, you could argue that I could argue that 7 or 8 years ago we had a multiplicity of one-bedroom flats, which actually wouldn't have been a bad buy for us. Who were they sold to? They were sold to private landlords in general, and they were buy-to-rent. That's where maybe we should have been putting things in place. What I'm finding is that I talked to quite a lot of people on Mersey where there is hardly a single council house left. They've all been bought. And I've got a lot of sympathy with this motion because effectively, on hindsight, I disagree with Tim. I think that right to buy was not a good thing. That we should have kept a housing stock and we should have kept control of a housing stock. Now, that's going back into the dim and distant past. But there are ways, and I note that it's a very clever motion in that it recognises the desire by many to own their own home. This was part of a Conservative manifesto, and the result of that was the Liberal Democrats went down to 8. Sorry. And the Labour Party obviously did not gain any great traction from opposing it. So we are where we are. This is a democratic view that has been stated. Whether I agree with it or not is for myself to consider, I think. I found Councillor Hayes' issue on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac interesting in what was left out, was that they both had to buy bundles of mortgages by some very dodgy people. They were forced to, by a certain William Clinton, who said, if you've got a $10 deposit, we will buy you a house. That was going exactly the opposite way. What I think we need to look at much more closely is the other routes, rent to own. Local authority or council, parish housing trusts, which we can do. We can allocate land purely for that. But if you ask someone who's in a council house they've bought, whether they think someone in a housing association house, which is built from the proceeds of sales of their council house, should be allowed to buy, they say yes. Because why should it be one for one and different for the other? So I think you have to have a kind of balanced view on this, is that it's a hell of a problem, but just to politicise it in the chamber doesn't do it justice. We should all work together to see that we make the best out of what is coming down the turnpike towards us. But I really do get saddened by overtly national political issues being brought into this chamber. You know, why are we doing it? Let's look at how we can get round this. On that basis, Madam Mayor, I'm going to abstain.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hazel, did you indicate to speak? Okay, would you like to speak now? And then I've got Councillor Frame afterwards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, as both Councillor Bourne and Councillor Tim Young inferred, I do get housing. I agree with Councillor Willits and all that's been said on my side that those who can own their own homes ought to own their own homes. And what we should be concentrating on is genuinely working together to find ways of supporting those who genuinely can't. What depresses me about what has come from the opposition benches here, from us that is, the opposition benches, is the doom and gloom and the patronising of the lower paid or the less well off. They were almost painting a picture of Dickensian Britain in our council homes in this borough, and they are nothing like that. All our tenants, from whatever status they come, have aspirations. And I would like to see this council support people, to raise people up, not to keep telling them that, sorry, you're poor. We will look after you from the cradle to the grave. You don't have to work, you don't have to think, you don't have to achieve. And I think that is a huge disservice to the people in this borough. And council housing is part of it. Yes, we should champion those people in our council homes and we should support them to achieve. We shouldn't keep telling them that they are not allowed to have aspirations because that's only for the so-called rich. I, for one, will not be supporting this motion because I am actually going to support the government of the day who won this election partly on this issue, and I will wait and I will see just how well or how badly this policy does. And until I see evidence to the contrary, I will support this government in what it's trying to do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Frame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wonder if the people on the opposition benches have thought what the effect is going to be on their villages. Because at the moment, young people in villages are finding it extremely difficult to stay in their own village because they can't afford the housing there. Now, if we sell off housing association stock in the villages, there is nowhere for young people to go to stay in the village. They will have to move out. And the result of that is villages will not prosper because there'll be old people. We need to keep young people in villages. And that's been one of the aspirations of housing associations, building affordable houses in the villages. Now, if you take that away, I'm afraid that the village life is going to suffer enormously and the families are going to suffer. So I think people need to think about what effect it's going to have on village life. And that comes from an urban councillor.
Councillor Bentley.
Well, Madam Mayor, I wasn't going to speak into that last contribution. The problem we have is, of course, that village young people can't stay in their villages because they're not allocated the housing there in the first place. And that's what we have to bear in mind. What we need to build is more affordable housing. I support council Giles entirely. Let parish councils develop housing. Let them have nomination rights. That will address your problem, Councillor Frame, which I wholeheartedly agree with. But you can't blame this policy for that effect you're saying here. People do have the right to buy. We have the right also to replenish that stock. That is what the government's proposing. I've had no one argue against that. If it's sell one, buy one, sell one and build one, preferably build two, all the better. Do not deny the very people you represent the chance to have what you have, their own home.
All right, we've still got a flurry of hands, and then we'll be coming to the end of this. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been listening to this, and I think you've got to go back to the basis of why we had this right to buy. I was sitting around listening to Margaret Thatcher when she did it. Thought it was a good idea. We happened to live in a council house. What the country was building council houses for is for people that couldn't afford to buy a house. And it was somewhere for them to live that was easy access to get into and rents were low enough to live there. Now, when you give the right to buy thing, it's perfectly okay. It's a good system. And I support the government's idea of right to buy. But what I would suggest is, and there's nothing we can do about it in this chamber, I would suggest that if you want to think someone has the right to buy, fine. Say, you want to buy, here's a grant, go and buy it outside the council housing lease, so that the council houses remain available for those that need them. If you want a right to buy one in the market. And the government, if they're really intent on it, give them a grant to help them do it.
Right, finally, we've got Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to speak either, but I just want to ask opposition members some simple maths. If you sell something that's worth 100% for less than 100%, so if you sell it at a discount of 5%, 10%, 15%, even more, as is being suggested, how do you afford to sell one and build one?
Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Smith, please, to sum up?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I was going to make some comments about Councillor Locker's contribution, but I think Councillor Bourne very clearly explained why this is a matter relevant to every councillor. Yes, even a councillor from St John's that's got very few units of social housing in its boundaries, because it affects everybody. And it may not affect my residents directly, but it affects their children or their grandchildren who are unable to afford and live and work in Colchester. And that is what we're doing here. And we do have the power to influence. Don't forget, one of our members here is an MP and will be voting on this. And I assume he is still keeping in touch with what the council decides and does and debates. And I hope those points will get through to him too. Councillor Oxford, you were quite right to correct me. The housing position's got worse since this motion was put down, and it's going to continue to get worse. But what's got even worse is the government now has changed the rules again. It was going to wait until we actually had an empty property before we had to give them the money. But it's decided that's too much of a risk. It's now going to impose a levy on this council. It's sort of like a tax. In fact, it is a tax. In fact, it's not so much a bedroom tax, it's taxing the whole flaming house this time, because this council will be assumed to sell a certain number of high-value properties every year, and we will have to send that money off to the government. Whether we sell them or not doesn't matter. It looks a bit to me like a tax, actually, and that looks a way of taking money out of the councils. So all this talk we've heard earlier about how generous the government's being, I think we're really seeing through that. And I do thank Councillor Harrington for his contribution, because I think he put the arguments quite rightly from the Conservative point of view. Is looking about enabling home ownership. Yes, home ownership is good. I own my own home. That's good, but it is not for everybody. And for those who it is not for, there should be social housing. And there should be social housing in Colchester. And what we're seeing, Councillor Bentley, with the greatest respect, is not one-for-one building in Colchester, but a property being sold in Colchester and that money going somewhere else. So we are going to see, in our villages in particular, despite rural exception zones, very little new building taking place there. I would love to see more. The real people who we've seen affected by this policy are those who would have moved into the new council houses that this council would have been able to build without this disastrous policy coming in. Those are the people who are going to really suffer here directly in Colchester. So I think this is quite true. And Councillor Pearson, you make a very good point. Any fool can sell £10 notes for £7.50. When they're doing that and they're saying, I'm going to run a bit short of cash, if they then say, don't worry, I'll mug the next person coming down the street and take some money off them, which is effectively what the government's doing, we've got a right to be upset. And when we're the person walking down the street that's being mugged by the government, we have definitely got a right to be upset. Not just for ourselves, but for our council tenants and the people in social housing in Colchester who are being hit by this unfair tax by the government. And finally, can I draw your attention to the wording on the motion? We recognise on the motion that people do, in many cases, want to own their own homes. We say nothing against that. What we're saying under Section 2 is this council opposes the forced sell-off of council housing to pay for this plan. Yes, it was in the Conservative manifesto. If the Conservatives want to do that, pay for it out of taxation. You can raise income tax, you can cut the tax breaks to the wealthy, there's lots of other taxes you can do. You can even raise taxes directly or indirectly, but do not do it by stealth and do not tax the most vulnerable in this society, because that's what we're seeing time and time again from this Conservative government, is attacking the most vulnerable in our society, those in social housing, those who can't afford to own their own homes. Those are the ones who are suffering. And I ask the Conservatives opposite, who do have a conscience, who do not represent the nasty party, to think very carefully how you vote on this matter. Thank you.
Councillor Young, you had a motion. Is it seconded?
Name vote, please, Madam Mayor.
Yep, okay. It's from county. We have to stand up. Okay, thank you very much. So it will be a named vote. That's county rules.
Okay, councillors,
Mr.
we're
Weavers
voting
will-
on the motion. Councillor Barton. For. Councillor Bentley.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Blundell.
Not voting.
Not voting. Councillor Bourne. For. Councillor Buston. Abstain. Councillor Chapman.
Not voting.
Not voting. Councillor Chillingworth. Abstain. Councillor Chua. For. Councillor Cook. For. Councillor Cope. For. Councillor Corey. For. Councillor Davis.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Fairley Crow. Abstain. Councillor Feltham. For. Councillor Frame. For. Councillor Gamble. For. Councillor Goss. For. Councillor Graham. For. Councillor Hardy.
For. Oh,
For.
I don't mean for. I don't mean for.
Sorry?
I mean abstain.
Abstain. Okay, I'll repeat that then. Councillor Hardy, abstain. Councillor Harrington, abstain. Councillor Harris, for. Councillor Havis,
For.
for. Councillor Hayes,
For.
for. Councillor Hazel,
Definitely abstaining.
abstaining. Councillor Higgins, P, for. Councillor Hogg, for. Councillor Jarvis, abstain. Councillor Jowers, abstain. Councillor Laws,
Abstain.
abstain. Councillor Liddy, for. Councillor Lissimore, abstain. Councillor Locker,
Abstain.
abstain. Councillor McLean, F, abstain. Councillor McLean, J, abstain. Councillor Manning, for. Councillor Martin, abstain. Councillor Moore, abstain. Councillor Nash,
For my grandchildren.
for. Councillor Oxford, B, for. Councillor Oxford, G, for. Councillor Pearson, for. Councillor Scott, for. Councillor Scott Boutel,
For.
for. Councillor Sheen, abstain. Councillor Smith, for. Councillor Sykes, for. Councillor Willits, abstain. Councillor Young, T, for. The Deputy Mayor,
For.
for. The Mayor,
Not voting.
not voting. Thank you. Madam Mayor, the results of the vote are 28 voting for the motion, 22 abstaining, none against the motion. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Councillors, we're now going to take a break before the next motion. 10 minutes? 10 minutes. Thank you.